couldn't really go along with the right wing post-COVID, actually. But you add Stop the Steal to that, you add a lot of things, and I was just basically out. I felt like I had very little in common with them. Um, I guess I've been, to be fair, a little bit kind of anti-Trump or sympathetic towards Trump out of just my extreme dislike of Ron DeSantis and my kind of sense of, despite it all, despite his incompetency and buffoonery, he represents something bigger than your average Republican. And in a weird way, I just kind of admire that fact. But I will not vote for Donald Trump under any circumstance, and including this circumstance. So that's kind of where I am. So, look, at the end of the day, he's a fascinating guy, and you have to talk about him. But he was a absolute dud while in office, and by late Trump years, I think he was something worse than a dud. But anyway, those are just my personal thoughts. Skog, you are up first.
I just want to start with a quick mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Not a lot of background noise, right?
No.
Okay. I don't know if it's welcome, but I bring a European perspective. I had one foot in Europe and one foot in North America for some time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the initial kind of Trump coming on stage was very exciting for us, as I suppose you could call us alternative in our political beliefs, especially during that time.
Sure.
But what you mentioned with him essentially being a flop, I think also reflects on the majority of people who voted for him, and the only people who are left are kind of kooky. We talked about this a week or so ago as well, with the major problem of having these absolutely insane people like come up with these really, really elaborate excuses for why he doesn't take action or for why he totally won the election.
Yeah.
But I think most of us feel the same way you do about him, that he's, at the end of the day, he's just like everyone else. And
Well, he's not like everyone else.
But
At
you know
the
what I
end
mean,
of the
right?
day, he remains a fascinating human being, for good and for ill.
Right,
You
but I
know,
meant in his in
it's good.
action, in his he doesn't actually do all that
Yeah.
much.
Right. No, that is true. Yes. What he represents and what he implies, or what kind of energy he creates, is infinitely larger than any actual policy. You know, like there's no lasting policy. I mean, I think the lasting legacy of Donald Trump is Roe v. Wade being overturned, and I think that's something that he personally disagrees with. And it's something that wasn't really a part of the Trump movement in 2015 and 2016 that, you and I remember. But so there's no real policy achievement or any kind of lasting thing like that. But again, what he continues to represent, despite it all, despite his stupidity and buffoonery and silliness, it is just something that is massive and great. I mean, I do think, like, I unironically say that this guy didn't do anything in office. He appointed bad people. His movement is full of morons. I mean, I would agree with all of this, but he might very well end the country. I mean, it's like the distance between what he represents or threatens and the actual guy and public policy is it's huge. I don't know if there's ever been such a delta, as it were, between like emotions and feelings and historical meaning and et cetera versus rubber hitting road policy. It's kind of fascinating. I don't have any. I'm at a loss for words to describe Trump, actually.
I think it's almost impossible to replicate the kind of enthusiasm we had for someone like Trump back then. I feel like
Yeah.
everyone since has been kind of dull. You say what you will, it was exciting. He spoke of things that no candidate spoke about. Um, and I think he rode that wave because there's a lot of people who was frustrated about that.
Yeah.
He definitely touched a nerve. I also think it's funny that like Ron DeSantis was built up to be this huge like candidate that would combat Donald Trump and combat him through his like policies and stuff. But he's just pretty much another uncharismatic Republican who comes off as very fake and unlikable. And so Trump once again has the upper hand, just like he did in 2016. It seems like in the primary session, which
Yeah.
is pretty funny.
No question.
Yeah. Also, it's funny too because it's like it's what you said, Richard, about like the Supreme Court people that he appointed. That was like his big victory, but like it wasn't like it wasn't too long into his presidency or like, his post presidency. Like the January part of his presidency where he like started shitting on the members that he like appointed. He's like, well, they're cucks. They won't do anything because they won't overrule the election or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
he's like literally going against everything that he was like supposed to be celebrated for. It's pretty funny how self destructive he is. But then, in a way, that's kind of like what a lot of people on his camp like. People like Tim Pool, who's like, "Hell yeah, I love Trump because he's going to come in, and he's going to burn everything down." And that's his like new platform now. And it's like that's why a lot of people like him. But that's also why a lot of people are fucking afraid of him. That's why I'm afraid of him because he's
Yeah,
like,
you should be afraid of him. Like
yeah, like
again, I feel like I'm like a shrill liberal at this point in my life. Like you should be rationally afraid of him because it's like and in awe of him on some level because it's like this guy as stupid as it is, like when I mention something like this could lead to an actual civil war, am I being hysterical? Like no. I'm being like this is real. And I don't know what to say. I mean, I haven't looked at all of the comments by like Congress, like the MAGA congressmen or whatever. I did see some highlights from Fox News last night. And granted, they weren't like calling for war, but they were basically all in unison saying this is a total hit job. They've weaponized the federal government against us. We're alone. They hate conservatives, want to destroy us all. I mean, all that kind of talk. And I'm sure I could go and find pretty easily some MAGA people and MAGA people in high places who are basically more or less calling for civil war at this point. So it's like, this is real. We're not being hysterical when we say like I mean it is kind of funny when you think about like America and like the myths we have of the founding fathers as these like enlightened humanists and Whigs and setting up the perfect system or something, and then it gets destroyed by a reality TV show
by
star.
one guy, by one guy.
If I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even sure what the American people want anymore. I mean, I feel like
I have no
back in the
No.
2016, it really seemed like there was this goal of securing the border, which was important, and I feel like the white population was like, okay, maybe we should strengthen our core kind of founding stock, and maybe not move
It
so.
feels like the goal right now with Donald Trump is straight up that he's just funny, and we want like it's like people who are like I don't fucking like him because he's annoying, and people are like I like him because he's annoying, and that's the
Yeah.
platform. That's it. Like that's all there is. Like 2016, and like see what people 2016. That was like I think a debate of like ideas.
Well, yeah,
Even if
there is
it's
a reasonable like I would defend 2015 and 2016. And now granted, so much of Trump was kind of bombast and silliness, but you can get if you look at Trump's statements, if you look at Trump's statements over the last like 20 years, his Larry King interviews, his interviews on the Daily Show and so on. There's like a reasonable you could say kind of like right-wing liberalism is maybe the best way to describe it. It's not the conservatism of the religious right that he won over in 2016. It's a kind of the Japs are building too many cars and we gotta make stuff here at home. We should have, as Ivanka said at the RNC, we should have I think she said we should have universal family leave for women working. The system's rigged, but I can rig it on your behalf. Let's build back coal mines and there was a lot of, let's have a national healthcare system, which he said in a book, the country we deserve in 20, which he released in 2000 or thereabouts. there's like a defensible, reasonable, like national liberalism that
I
Trump
would say
represents.
it was like a very effective populist campaign. You know, like
Yeah.
not all populist campaigns are equally effective. Some are like I would say most are kind of ridiculous because the people who are like the figures of that ideology are kind of stupid. But I would say that Donald Trump is not stupid. I would say he knows what he's doing, at least when it comes to attracting the general public. And I think
Yes.
I would say he's lost a step, but even then I would still say he, at least over his Republican opponents, I would say he's definitely one upping them in terms of rhetoric,
Yeah.
in terms of like humor and shit. Like yeah, that's what the voters really like
Well,
in the Republican.
he's a genius and a buffoonish moron at the same time. It's
Yeah,
kind of remarkable. Like, he does have a sense for how to reach people, and he had that sense when he was going to like the World Wrestling Federation and getting into staged rap battles with other celebrities. I mean, it's absurd, but like it is kind of ingenious. And people like me, I always want to analyze things and like divide them up and kind of see the moving parts, or say something really kind of heady and provocative, and try to be a 21st century Nietzsche or all this kind of larpy stuff I do. I can be criticized. But like I can't reach the people that he can reach. He can just do it. He has a touch. That being said, if I were to like come and talk to him and say like, "Oh, what do you think about the Constitution, or, Hegel, or the novels of John Updike?" I'm sure he would say like the dumbest nonsense imaginable. I mean, he one time there's this interview of him from like 20 years ago where he talked about his favorite movie, and his favorite movie was Citizen Kane, which I don't even know if he's seen Citizen Kane. I think he
oh
might
my
have just,
god, there
yeah,
was a fucking moment during like one of his rallies. I think it was after Parasite won Best Picture, and he was like, "Wow, remember the good old days with like Gone with the Wind? Let's
yeah,
bring
Gone
Gone
with
with
the
the Wind
Wind,
back." It's like
Sunset
you
Boulevard.
never like
No,
that's so
those are
fucking.
all great movies. I love them. They're all
But he's
very
never seen them. You know he's never seen them.
well,
He's never.
they're all very dark films, including Gone with the Wind, which is a kind of misunderstood movie, I would say. But Sunset Boulevard is an extremely dark movie. It's not about like the greatness of America. It's a gothic horror film, in a way. But the Citizen Kane thing, I mean, I bet he just said that because every list of the greatest movies has Citizen Kane on top, justifiably. But
Yeah.
but he seemed to kind of like miss the whole point of the movie. It's like he liked Citizen Kane. He was like, he was a great guy, a publisher, a lover, a man of the world. It's like, did you watch this film? It's like watching Hamlet and being like, a wonderful man, so poetic. It's like, think you're missing the point here, bro. But anyway, this is it's just, I guess I laugh so as not to cry about Trump at this point, but
I laugh whenever he says Ron DeSanctimonious. Like he says it so casually. I just find it so fucking funny.
yeah, Rob DeSanctis, like it's just there is a genius in those nicknames. There's a genius in everything he does, but then there's like a stupidity in everything he does. It's the most
The ultimate
bizarre
midwit. Yeah.
thing. Oh, he's not a midwit. He's on both halves of he's like on both outer extremes of the bell curve. He's like a super
Well,
genius and a completely retarded person at the same
Yeah, it
time. It's like
equals out on
remarkable.
average. An average becomes a midwit.
Trump has
Yeah.
a Trump has a talent for knowing the minds. The people who believe everything they read on the internet. Those types of people who fall for things. Trump is one of them, and he connects with them. And his genius is in knowing what will gin them up, what will get their attention.
Yes. What about the birth certificate thing? Like we kind of forget about this because there's so much has happened. But like his connection with the anxiety, understandable anxiety about someone who's non-white named Barack Obama as your president. Let's just stipulate that. And he connected it in this like kind of crazy way, and it was stupid. It was wrong. But Oh, I don't know. Maybe someone would defend the birth certificate hoax. I wouldn't, but it was stupid and wrong, but it kind of like got right to the matter of things. And then after he went for it, within like 2 weeks, all these major conservatives were echoing him. I mean, like he changed the game. Whereas Ron
Well,
DeSantis, like, ham-fistedly tries to placate the right wing on Twitter or whatever. And Tucker is a very similar person.
but
Trump like changes things. He forces you. He knows what you want before you know it, and then he kind of like forces you to start supporting him and repeating his memes.
Well, like the birther conspiracy existed before Donald Trump, but Donald Trump was the one who gave it a megaphone,
Yeah,
and that's why so many of that crowd they rallied to him, and that they'll stick with him to this day because they feel like, oh, this guy's a truth teller,
yeah,
because he's the one that will actually could get out in front of a crowd and speak what I read on Reddit last night, even no matter how stupid it is.
yeah,
And they thank him for that because they're told that they're stupid by other people, but then they have this guy. They say, no, look how successful he is. He agrees with me, and they'll stick with him regardless.
yeah. Stanley Kubrick, a really wonderful filmmaker. Perhaps his greatest film was the '69 moon landing. Am I right, folks?
Yeah, he knows how to tap into things that seem like untappable when it comes to like big mainstream politicians. He's really good at that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um, despite all of that, though, despite all of that, I still feel, and maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. I still feel like he probably has like, I think there's like a handful of things that kind of kneecaps him. One of them just being his rhetoric. I think that just turns off way too many fucking suburban women. We saw that in the 2022 primary or midterms, where it's just like a lot of his like type of candidates, they just got fucking slaughtered. It wasn't even close for some of those races. And I think he did a great job at like sort of hurting the Republicans' chances at like actually doing very fucking well in the midterms because they had like Joe Biden is like super weak, like all things considered. But like the fact that Republicans just can't beat them, it's just like I think it says a lot about them. I think it says a lot about Donald Trump's kind of like his I would say his personality. Because like a lot of people just didn't like his rhetoric in 2020. But then also just like Republicans in general, that whole like abortion shit, that's going to be pinned on Donald Trump. Like Joe Biden's going to be able to be like, well, he put the fucking judges in. He put the judges in. He supported removing Roe v. Wade, and that's what got Republicans kind of slaughtered. So I would still say that despite some of his a lot of his quirks, I would still say that he's got like way too much baggage going into this fucking election. I still think Joe Biden probably wins. But
oh, you think he has baggage at this point? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like serious, like not like January 6th was well, I guess January 6th is kind of still baggage. It's tough to say, like it's just tough to say, like what sticks on him and what doesn't. Like it's hard to ever know, like yeah, I don't know. Like it seems like the baggage on Hillary stuck more on her than did Trump, but now Trump has like even more baggage. But Joe Biden also kind of has baggage. So who has like the most baggage? I would say Trump easily, but some people might disagree.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no
By the
question.
way, Richard, can I ask you a
Um,
question?
yeah, sure.
So from an outside perspective again, you know, to me, Biden really does seem like he's very old, and that whole kind of theme. What do you think about that? Because I've never actually heard you comment on that. Do you think that he's like fully capable and that he's all there?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's underestimated in terms of his ability to function. I mean, there's no doubt he's old. There's no doubt he fell down in a way that a 50-year-old man would not have, recently. I mean, a lot of these things are fair, but it's not like the president is, wakes up at 5 a.m. and runs the government and pulls levers and twists knobs or something. I mean, he is a front man in many ways, and he has to make decisions, calculations. I think he actually made some really tough calculations early in his term, the greatest one being that we're going to see through the Afghanistan withdrawal. Um, he's also made and despite it all, I mean, it was very clear that that was going to go south to some degree, and it was kind of worse than we imagined. But he saw it through. I gave him credit then, I'll give him credit now. In terms of the Ukraine situation, he's made a calculation. Now, I'm actually a little more critical. I would be more, I guess maybe aggressive is the right word on the Ukraine war situation, or I would offer a more coherent vision. But that's my own personal criticism. The fact is, he's made calculations, and with his advisors, and these have been overall good. And so I think he's underestimated. Now, again, could he kind of like fall off mentally, and we've got a Dianne Feinstein or a Weekend at Bernie's situation on our hands? Okay, all of those things are kind of fair to talk about. But I generally think that he should be given credit. And I think he would make a lot better decisions than, calculations than most of his colleagues.
Because one thing I'm very much
Uh,
worried about here is one thing I've actually noticed with the current kind of shift in war hawking, or willingness to go into conflict. The Republicans, have cheered on the idea of invading countries and supporting rebels for, you know, since Iraq. But all of a sudden, when it comes to a European country bordering Russia, it's not that important anymore. We just stay out, we have nothing to do with this conflict, etc., etc. I, as a European who borders Russia, is very thankful that Ukraine receives the aid it requires in order to defend itself. And I fear a Republican president who's going to be too chummy chum with Putin, and basically just going to cease sending aid to Ukraine because of the talking points that these people have been making. Especially you hear
yes,
Tucker, right?
as you should be.
Tucker
Yeah.
essentially sprouting what I consider to be conspiracy theories. And I used to like Tucker about how Ukraine is blowing up its own dams and shit. Like, this is kooky. This is so stupid, and I'm scared of it.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
frustrating. That's becoming like the mainstream kind
absolutely.
of Republican narrative.
Yeah. No. Look, Donald Trump would end the war in 24 hours by writing off Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he would do at this point. Now, again, I'm willing to talk through, like, have a serious conversation of ways of handling this. And, do we want to keep sending men to the trenches where they're going to be slaughtered? Might we need to accept a divided Ukraine and things like that? I've actually been talking about that for a while. So, I mean, reasonable, like, serious discussions can occur, but Trump is just going to write off Ukraine to Vladimir Putin. That's what he's going to do. That's how he's going to end the war. You know, I don't think he was exactly a Russian agent in 2016. I think that Russia saw him as bringing chaos to the world, and thus they supported him. I think Manafort was a Russian asset. I don't think that's too much of speculation there. But Manafort was gone. But he is Trump is and Trumpism, whether it's Tucker or some of these other people mimicking him, they are effectively Russian assets,
Uh,
and it's extremely dangerous.
I don't think there was much merit to the original kind of accusation of being a Russian asset. However, I can understand where they're coming from, because the interest of Trump sometimes aligns with Russia more often than you'd think. Very much on the cases of simply doing nothing because it's cheaper. I think Trump was a big fan of the whole they have to pay for everything kind of policy, especially when it comes to military intervention. And so the concept of sending anything for free, I don't think Trump likes. Um,
Yes. And there was a general declinism. I mean, many people were questioning the legitimacy of NATO for some time now. I mean, there's a kind of paleoconservative declinism that you'll sometimes hear, George Kennan warned us and blah, blah, blah. All this stuff about why are we in NATO? Russia's a Christian country now. I've heard this for 20 years from paleoconservatives. Now, to be fair, it has some merit, but at this point, it has absolutely no merit. And dismantling NATO or demoralizing NATO, which Trump would do, would be a catastrophe and would hand over Ukraine and perhaps more to Russia immediately. And that is the direct consequence of supporting Republicans. I mean, Christie with Chris Christie, that wouldn't be a consequence. DeSantis, who the hell knows what he actually thinks? With well, I don't like Mike Pence, but Mike Pence seems pretty decent on this. Um, but with other Republicans who are mimicking Trump, you have to at least assume that they're going to fulfill their promises and they would act like him. So, yeah, I mean, I won't vote for a Donald Trump under any circumstances, including this one. I won't vote for any of these other Republicans under any circumstance. I could be kind of talked into Chris Christie at this point. I would vote for Joe Biden over Mike Pence in a heartbeat. I mean, we're kind of dealing with centrist in the sense of these people. If we're focusing on foreign policy, we're dealing with centrist here. And Chris Christie, Joe Biden, I could feel safe with either of those two.
I feel like probably the biggest hindrance for Joe Biden isn't necessarily like record or anything. I think it's going to be his like ability to whether or not he can actually like defend himself or defend his ideas on the debate stage or in like interviews and shit. I feel like there's a lot of really fucking good defenses when it comes to his Afghanistan shit. Especially like if you want to say like, hey, Donald Trump, you started the negotiations, you started the withdrawal process. How would you have handled it differently? And then kind of hold his feet to the fire. But like, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I guess I don't know if Joe Biden can like totally do that. Like, I like him, I support him, but I just don't know if he can like rhetorically like combat that kind of like narrative.
Don't underestimate this. Everyone underestimates Joe Biden.
We'll see.
He gets a little energy in his tummy. And the guy's a fighter. He's going to start. He has a little Trump in him. I mean, you attack old Joe, and he'll call you fat to your face.
Sure, he can have energy. My thing is whether or not he'll actually have like the rhetorical ability to like whether or not he can like intelligently like defend himself, not just like scream "you're a fucking idiot" on the debate. Like I mean like whether or not
you're
can,
a horse.
Come on, man.
Nincompoop.
Shut up! I told him to shut up on the debate.
One thing I think that is surprising to most people is how you've seen Joe Biden, stutter his way through speech and say silly things, but sometimes something just clicks and he becomes very, very clear and concise in the way that he speaks and carries himself. And I don't quite understand it because it's like an on and off switch.
Not a moment of clarity.
Yeah, he just has moments of clarity where he just becomes a machine. I just wish we'd see him like that more often because I constantly see him, stumbling over his words and just saying gibberish.
I just want to bring him back to like the 2012 version of him with Paul Ryan. I think that was the best version of Joe Biden. Old, but not too old. I think that was his best.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi. I just wanted to say that we can't ignore how Trump brought this on himself by ignoring the social media censorship that was going on for like 4 straight years under his presidency. And he basically let his biggest grassroots supporters get wiped out. So in a way, I see this as kind of justice on Trump, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to what you're saying. I mean, there is an interesting thing where a ton of his supporters were getting wiped out and people who were very useful for him in 2016, but you also have to see that in context because on one level, I remember there was like a 2018 social media summit or something, and you had all these just like dumb e-grifter types who were meeting there, and none of them had actually been kicked off social media. So it was Tim Pool type, idiots, and they were chosen. These are the guys. They don't have the baggage. They're not too smart. They're not going to offend anyone. They're not going to be crazy, they, blah, blah, blah. And the other thing about it is that, yes, a lot of the alt-right got censored, but, QAnon was the alt-right times 1,000. And it was much bigger. It reached normies on a deeper level. I mean, the way I look at it with the alt-right is that it was this kind of like haphazard, hastily assembled, unpaid to a large degree, although some people were paid, PR campaign. And Trump almost needed it. And it worked. But it wasn't ultimately successful enough for him. And so they moved in. I mean, I think one thing that I find very interesting, it's who is Q? What are the origins of Q? We can talk about this for a while. I have my ideas, but there's no question that at some point the Trump campaign itself felt that working with Q or amplifying or et cetera was helpful to them. And maybe they shouldn't do it like too over the top, but they should kind of sort of do it. I mean, the amount of times that Trump and Trump allies said things like the storm is coming and all of this kind of like, sub rosa, sub tweeting stuff. I mean, you just cannot deny it. And maybe they were even being influenced by it themselves. But it's they didn't need the AR at some point. The AR was just kind of baggage. It was too hardcore, edgy, or whatever. And they went to something that's even bigger and goofier, and something that became something that the AR never became, which is a kind of like religious like quality. So I get you. I think there's some merit to what you said, but I think it's rather more complicated.
Yeah, well, to just bring up like one example, like if you were to go back to 2016 on a website like Reddit, which is one of the biggest social media websites out there, back in like 2016, Reddit was always liberal, but back then it at least had a faction within that was more right wing and would sometimes actually get its posts onto the front page. Over Trump's tenure, that minority of right wingers was completely annihilated from the website to where Reddit is what it is now. And that's just one website. It's all these big social media companies went that way. And, the results have been ugly, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think the kind of
Yeah.
splashback of Trump moving things a little right has been that the norm has moved significantly further left um, in the
Yes.
social media total takeover. It used to be pretty like 40-60 maybe. Now it's, these forums are not accessible by right wingers, really. If you want to maintain your sanity.
No. Polly, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the greatest disappointments in the last century has been how utterly pathetic and impressionable Americans, especially those on my side of the aisle, have proven to be. I mean, everything you guys are talking about, it's like, how much of a pussy bottom bitch do you have to be? I'm sorry, but like
Wow.
to fall for all of this crap and to allow yourselves to be led around by these kind of people, like, it has just been
But that's
disappointing.
kind of who they are.
I
They're
know.
I mean,
I'm
it's like that's how they are in every aspect of their
I think you
lives.
underestimate weapons grade copium, when things are almost too bad to be true, I guess, for some people. They have a tendency to clinch onto things that give them comfort.
Yeah, I guess I thought that for as much as people like myself have made fun of the left for years, it's like, holy shit, we are pathetic on this side. And one of my greatest pet peeves in the world is weak men. And my conservative side seems to be chock full of weak ass men. And that's been annoying. And that's one of the things I've never understood about Donald Trump and how people could go for Donald Trump is like, the dude is such a, again, little pussy bottom bitch. But he seems to be the top pussy bottom bitch in this case. So, you
In the
look,
sense that so much of his stuff is like whining and victimization and so on.
oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole right is basically a grievance mongering, group of people at this point.
Oh, yeah.
They have no actual issues.
Well, and there's that, yeah, he whines about everything. He's a little victim. He doesn't talk about what he's going to do about a damn thing. He just is like, oh, look what they're doing to me. And he is so owned. If you really look at it, you can tell the guy is owned by all of these other forces. And it's utterly disappointing. Um in my circles, like, I would say most of the people that I'm politically associated with are kind of like, well, we don't want DeSantis, but we don't want Trump. So if we have to vote for DeSantis, then we will vote for DeSantis.
Okay.
I'm in the
This is like Midwestern rock-ribbed Republican types.
well, that, and I actually talked to a lot more northeastern and southeastern conservatives, and a lot of people are, and this is in my kind of, I've never considered myself never Trump, but um, the never Trump group is kind of like, well, we will vote for DeSantis, but because we can't vote for Trump. I think DeSantis, honestly, is just as dangerous, if not more so.
Yeah.
So I'm never either D.
Yeah.
Never for either D.
He's going to eradicate wokeness from American society.
Right. Jeff Giza, what a surprise. You're welcome to join in.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Interesting day. I just wanted to, I guess, could comment on a number of things, but I wanted to invite you guys to check out a piece I wrote. I put it out the other day. It's pinned on my profile called "The Trumpist Case for Biden," and it's
Oh yeah, I
interesting.
saw that.
Yeah, it's because it's interesting when you think about, the
You're
Trump
once
movement.
more copying my ideas, but I say that as a
Well,
great compliment.
Well, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say copying your ideas. I mean, I would say we've maybe landed in similar places with, with very, very different paths. But no, I mean, I do think you're teasing
I'm
me.
joshing. I'm joshing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, fuck you. No, I'm just joking. No, it is interesting, just the whole story arc of the movement and reflecting on 2016, and I kind of cringe looking back at that area. Obviously, made some mistakes and misjudgments. At the same time, like there was I think a legitimate policy agenda there. I think there was a legitimate desire to kind of disrupt the stagnant kind of elite. And the disruption occurred, but the building didn't really happen behind it. And so, kind of, first phase of disillusionment happened when Trump wasn't really executing and he started indulging QAnon and he was just buffoonish. And, for a while I was like, I am blind to that, I think. And then, by the 2020 election, like I was completely pretty demoralized. I felt like when I saw Trump supporters, I felt bad for them, like they were being conned. And then
Yeah.
the real black pill happened after January 6th. I was like, I'm not sure what to make of this. I'm just going to like look at it with an open mind. And the more I studied the tradecraft, like replacing Pentagon officials a month before a contested election, the more I was like, holy shit, he basically attempted a coup, like in the most buffoonish manner possible. And then I looked around, to Polly's point, at all of these conservatives who call themselves constitutional conservatives, who I had always kind of looked up to as like, oh wow, these guys are really holding on to the Constitution. Like, and they didn't even call Trump out on his gross violations of the Constitution. It's like, really? And at that point, I was like, the GOP is completely morally bankrupt, completely. At least that
Yeah.
side of it is. And just now, I mean, I'm hoping we reach a moment of clarity where it's pretty black and white that, like, Trump, I think we could look back in history. Maybe we might look back historically and view, wow, Trump was the best thing that ever happened in this country because it inspired us to do all these things that were really ended up being positive. Or we could look back and it being this really negative, thing. And now is that time for like kind of like leadership and pulling it together. And so anyway,
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
rambling a little bit, but
no, that's fine. You made many good points. I mean, I agree. You're always this inveterate optimist. And, you know, we didn't do it the last time. We did, with Trump's victory, we didn't build sustainable institutions. Now, of course, the world was against us and whatever. Excuses, legitimate excuses. But I don't know if that's going to now happen. Maybe it will once we've learned from things. But there are forces bigger than us. Like, there are for every one, like Jeff Giza or something, there's like 100,000 diehard Trump fans who are seriously talking about civil war right now. So I just have a darker view of this, I
Yeah,
think.
and this may be where maybe there's a disagreement here. I mean, I actually love Trump's, like I like Trump supporters. Like I feel spiritually aligned with them in some level. Like I went into the Trump movement because my brother died, and it kind of made me realize, like, oh, what about the middle class, middle American who was left behind?
Yeah.
That, like, it was almost this form of grieving, and I still like those people spiritually, and I started getting really offended, like when I felt like they were being conned and like led off a cliff and led into jail and led to do all these things. And so, I have optimism on the people. They just need leadership to kind of help, help deprogram them, for lack of a better word. And that leadership's not coming from DeSantis. Obviously, it's not coming from Trump. I'm not sure. I think that's just going to have to be a citizen, collective thing. But I am optimistic that that can happen, and now's the time for it to happen. So
Yeah. I am not optimistic, and I don't
Richard,
I
I'd like to
feel
ask
like,
you a question.
real quick, hold on, let me finish real quick. I feel like if those people are empowered, they're going to do the same thing, only worse. That is my
yeah,
just honest
well,
opinion, but
yeah,
it's fine.
one other quick comment. I mean, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, we'll see, I guess, but I think it's a
Yeah.
leadership moment, and now the playing field is really open to define, like, does the Republican Party have a future? Does it actually have a soul? We'll find out. Like, the playing field is now open. But when all of this happened, I started thinking there's got to be some post-Trump synthesis in order for this country to really survive. And then I looked around and I realized, wow, Biden is the post-Trump synthesis. Like, he's sort of the practical execution of, like, this more sound and sensible Trumpist policies fused with some progressivism within there too. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking about
Uh,
that, I
okay,
would.
you can ask. Okay, you're not waiting your turn here. Um, so, but you haven't spoken yet. So just Lion Legal, ask your question, and then I'll,
Yeah,
I'll get
sure,
to
sure. So,
Vic
so
and
like,
Paula.
so like, I just want to ask it. It seems as if in the past you were an ardent Trump supporter, and you were like, essentially one of the staunchest people behind his campaign, but now you've completely changed. Plus, prior to this as well, you did identify yourself as a white supremacist. What changed? What changed between the past and now for you to like change your view and change the way that you identify yourself?
Well, I never identified as a white supremacist, but I guess I take your point. Yes, it's true that I was a staunch Trump supporter. However, I was one of the first off the bandwagon as well. I was, I think actually Charles said this, who's on this call. He said, everyone talks about all the friends they lost in 2016 when they supported Trump, and he was like, that's nothing compared to the friends I lost backing Joe Biden in 2020. And I can absolutely say that. So by 2018, I was getting pretty hated and, dare I say, kind of scapegoated in the movement. And a lot of that, maybe some of it was legit. Some of it was a way of scapegoating. Some of it was you should never criticize Trump. And so, I mean, I was very early off the bandwagon. I endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. I did not go in at all for the COVID nonsense that was pursued by the right and the MAGA right and the alt right or whatever in 2020 and 2021. So, it's been a long, slow process. I don't know. I mean, I have rethought some fundamental things, but I'm still a political radical. I'm still doing things that are radical in the best sense of that word. But in terms of how that is articulated by a president, yeah, as I just said, I would, centrism forever, baby. I would gladly vote for
Okay.
Joe Biden again. I would gladly vote. I would be willing to vote for Chris Christie. If Mitt Romney ran, I would be out
How
there
about Kamala?
endorsing him. So that's just where I am.
How about Kamala though? Would you vote for her?
How about who?
Kamala Harris?
I really, really dislike her personally. I have to be honest. So
Okay.
it
Okay,
would
you
be
said
kind of hard.
okay, you said that you have you still have extreme views.
I would vote for Hillary
Don't you
Clinton.
feel
Is
don't
that
you feel
isn't that kind of like edgy enough for you?
not particularly. You
Okay.
you said that you have extreme views, but don't you feel that
I
your
didn't say extreme views. I
okay,
said
extreme
radical
political
views in the
beliefs, right?
best sense of the word.
Okay, sure,
Radical.
sure. Radical means extreme, but okay, but don't you feel that they're not actually grounded in fact, though? So, like, these are your beliefs that are almost like a personal philosophy, but as far as fact is concerned, they're completely detached from what you believe, such as believing that black people did not build this country.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I would question your ability to root that claim in fact, but I don't really want to
Do you
get into
believe
some.
do you believe that black people built America or not?
You're just saying a slogan when you say that, so I don't really even know how to address that.
No, no, no.
What does that
Okay,
mean?
you stated that blacks and other minorities have not contributed anything basically to the West and
I've never said that.
America
I've never said
especially.
anything.
You,
I mean,
you've not said that.
I've never said they've never contributed anything. I mean,
What did you
that's a
say then? What did you
ridiculous
say?
statement. Look, if we want to get
Why are
to,
you
I
changing your
just,
views
to
now?
be
Because you
honest,
used
I
to
don't
say
really
this
want to talk.
before. So,
Well,
like, I'm
I'm sorry.
confused
I,
now.
as I
This whole
understand
thing
it,
is
this
about.
was. I'm sorry. As I understand it, this was not. This space was about Trump, not about racial issues. As I also understand it, Richard, you
No, no.
disavowed
Okay.
white nationalism. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, but how did he come to that?
All right, I'm
Lion legal, you should
back.
probably right? If you want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I just left. Let me do this. I am gonna hand over the hosting duties. Let me give Charles the hosting duties. I have to go actually run, but we discussed in the past. All right, I will. I just invited you to co-host, Charles, so you have the ability to kick people off and all that kind of stuff. I will accept.
I am much faster at
request.
kicking people off than you
Why
are.
don't we do this? Vic, you've had your hand up. Why don't you take the floor?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I really appreciate the chance to speak. So actually, I had a couple questions slash comments, and my first question was actually to Charles, since you know the intelligence world probably the best in this space. Could you I just like to hear your thoughts and what your analysis is on like the national security implications of the fact that Trump kept all this stuff in his place. Like, how worried should we be about like foreign nations essentially, like putting a whole bunch of spies in Mar-a-Lago for the last 2 years, getting that stuff? I mean, I remember that one like fake Rothschild Russian spy woman who was caught by the FBI or something going to Mar-a-Lago. How bad do you think this was, Charles? Just curious what your thoughts are. And then I have a couple more things.
Well, Blinken's in Saudi Arabia today, isn't he? Right? I mean, isn't that kind of the tell?
No, I mean, I don't know. Like, what does that mean? I'm sorry.
Well, let's just say that the Israelis are being made good here, and they're being very helpful to the prosecution of Trump. My supposition is that Trump will get convicted, maybe lightly sentenced, and ultimately pardoned by Joe Biden or by Chris Christie. That's kind of my sense of how it's going to go down. And by the way, there have been spies in Mar-a-Lago for like 20, 30 years. The place is wired up like a Christmas tree.
That I mean, so I'm not in like a veteran or anything. I've never been in the military. I've never done intelligence or anything like that. But like, I mean, I gotta say, like, just as an American citizen, as a lover of this country, I like this worries me a lot. Oh, worries me a whole hell of a lot. So, but I just have to. I guess the only thing I can do is put my faith in DOJ and DOD to protect us. So, yeah, that's So thanks, Charles. I appreciated that. The other
Generally,
thing,
Richard, I'm not kind of a fan of having people up in this space that we don't know already or who have, usernames that are not their full name. And there's a reason for that, which is that I think shaping of this conversation is kind of important. This is sort of like an American kind of conversation that I think needs to be had, but it is your space, so I'm going to let you make the call on it.
People like me who have not their names or random profile
what's the
pictures.
issue, Charles?
I've been in Richard Spencer's
Well,
calls for like as long as they've existed. And I think we provide.
yeah, I mean it's your space, Richard, but my general view is that I would take preference. So I would have Americans be the ones to talk about this more than others, because I think that there's going to be an effort to kind of frame the conversation in ways that aren't necessarily helpful or truthful. I mean, it's not every day a former president of the United States gets indicted, so I'd kind of prefer to have an American conversation about what this
I
means
am
before we
American.
bring
I
in
just
other
want to be
groups.
clear. I am American.
Okay.
Charles or Richard, would it make sense to end this space and then Charles started on your site, or do you guys want to stay here?
Up to you,
Well,
Richard.
I'm
Up to you.
fine. I mean, look, if it gets too out of hand, I sometimes will allow people to continue the space, and it gets out of hand, and then I just delete the thing. Yeah, I mean, I trust you guys. Just keep it under control. I'm
Yeah.
listening in right now. I'm just running some errands. I've got some dad duties to take care
Yeah,
of.
so I'm about to get home, but yeah, I mean, look, the short version is it's never a good day when a former president or any public official gets indicted for conduct that they did on the job, right? Like, you don't want to see that. You want the numbers of indicted politicians to be zero, right? Or indicted members of government to be zero. But I do think it's kind of a tragic day in some sense. For some of us, though, it's somewhat cathartic because we're actually seeing what was really going on. And what I've heard is that they were actually kind of generous with Trump, that there's like a whole lot of other things they could have charged him with. So I find that kind of telling and interesting as well. My guess is that Trump will ultimately cut some kind of deal if he doesn't have one already.
Yeah, and I just had one last question for Richard here. If I don't know if he's still available, but like, yeah. So
Yeah,
like,
I'm
is
here.
there anything that's gonna like, is this gonna break the Trump hold on the GOP base, or is it just too far gone?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question, and I don't have a definitive answer, and I'm not trying to dodge it, but the Alvin Bragg thing clearly cemented his grip on his base and even expanded his base for the primaries. I mean, I think that was a miscalculation on Bragg's part. He should have just let it go if his desire was to end Trump or whatever. I can
I think
hear
he was
counter
trying to
arguments to
be.
that.
I think he was trying to be the next Attorney General of the state of New York, right? I mean, I don't. I
Yeah,
think the Alvin Bragg indictment was actually more about Alvin Bragg than it was about Donald Trump.
that might be true as well. But my view is that though I can listen to counter arguments, I think it was a major miscalculation. Um, I don't, that's the question because, and I've been saying this on my, like Substack calls and stuff like this, where it's like, at some point, a straw is going to break the camel's back. Like you can't keep getting indicted and keep claiming that it's all a joke. And someone like Jack Smith is going to put forward evidence that is airtight. I mean, there's just a diminishing return, and it just doesn't work at some point, particularly if this is going to involve like serious other issues. If there's more to it than just a process crime, that is that there's, he's showing this to people. We know what the pro quo was, et cetera. And again, that's speculation, but we'll see. I do think that will like lessen his grip on the GOP, but like in terms of his base, I don't think I'm being too hysteric when I say like these guys, they might just lose their minds, and at least some of them will. I mean, it's just a real thing. I'm not trying to be outrageous, and I don't support that, but it almost just seems inevitable. This isn't 1974. This isn't other points in our history where there were enough gatekeepers, et cetera. We're in a new world, and we've seen the degree to which these guys have been detached from reality and so on. So, I mean, as I'm saying, I mean, I'm joking, but I'm laughing so I don't cry. I mean, this could lead to the end of the United States. I don't think that is too radical a statement to say. You don't need 51% of the country or 75% of the country to start creating a civil war. Again, don't hear that as like the 1860s or whatever. Like just some kind of radically dysfunctional situation. You don't need 50%. You don't need 75%. I mean, if 10% are so motivated, it can really start a cascade effect. I mean, it's a very, very serious thing. And I could easily make the case that this type of thing with Trump, putting him in jail perhaps, or house arrest, just, convicting him and then going to Georgia and going to J6, this could create that type of situation, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And I was just gonna say, to what you guys were talking about earlier about how almost like there's a Trumpist case for Biden or a conservative case for Biden. I just couldn't help but notice like the split screen today as we had all the drama in South Florida
Charles,
and
you have to
all
you have to
that.
police your audience here. People have their hands up.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm done then.
All right, I guess I'm taking over.
All right,
Hey, Alex.
you can start calling on people if you don't mind, since I'm in the car.
Yeah, let's go to Alex.
All right. Yeah. So just to follow on with the conversation, I thought it was very interesting what Richard had to say about how he believes that certain people are going to lose their minds. So to follow up with that, it's like do you guys foresee like numerous January 6th happening? Just like I don't know, different instances of certain groups.
I don't actually. I think enough people are sick of Trump. They'll just throw him out. I think what it comes down to is there's a moment where enough's enough. And I think for a lot of the Republican Party, enough is enough. That's my read on it.
I agree with that. I mean, I agree with Richard in that there definitely are risks out there of people acting out in all kinds of ways. But the case is increasingly just so, black and white at this point that I just don't see energy going into a January 6th type of event, at least not on my end.
Oh, I was actually suggesting that, Jeff Giza was going to be the type to just go nuts, in the words of Batman, you want to go nuts, let's go nuts. I mean, Jeff Giza, if you know him, he's a maniac.
I know. My journey of the last 6 years is discovering I'm pretty milquetoast centrist. I'm like radically reasonable.
Is Charles lagging for everyone else?
Yeah, it's lagging.
Just Charles, you're lagging pretty hard.
Charles, we can't hear you.
I can't hear you, man.
Yeah, there's a little bit of lag.
Why don't we go to Polly?
Yeah, I wanted to actually just tag on to a lot of what Jeff was saying. I think, well, both what Jeff and Richard were saying. I think I've actually been writing this article for the last couple of months that I keep going back to and kind of going away on because it's kind of political grief and loss on the right. Like if you're a sane member of the right. Um, but I don't know. I don't know necessarily at this point that it requires Trump for there to be political violence. I'm kind of the belief that I think we are going to see over the next few years more incidents of violence. I don't know that we're going to see as anything as severe as January 6th, but the people that are doing this are not, Trump was kind of their catalyst and their excuse for doing a lot of these things, but now they've kind of figured out that they like doing it. These people don't want to be told what to do. Like it's a bunch of adolescents basically being like, well, you can't tell me what to do. And, it's all about your freedoms and such. And yeah, people feel like kind of what Jeff was saying, like a lot of these people feel like they're just losing, losing, losing. And especially if you're from rural America, you lose. The last few decades have been a lot of losing. You're losing your jobs, you're losing your lifestyles, you're losing your farms, you're losing your kids. Kids are leaving for either lifestyle choices or because there's nowhere for them to work in your community anymore. And there's a lot of bitterness around that, and the bitterness is a huge motivator for these people. And they some of their blame, where they place their blame, is correct, but a lot of the blame goes to things that are not correct. And it's just a lot of anger and bitterness that Trump has given a permission structure to, and our so-called leaders, the kind of people that I used to look up to and admired, they have they've given this permission structure to everything. And I worry for the next few years because I really do think even this month during Pride Month, I think we will see some incidents of violence around that, um, because people think they can get away with things anymore, and there's just so much anger that's being encouraged. And whether you want to say that's external forces, I think there is foreign influence in that, but there's also currently a lot of domestic influence with that, and our social media echo chambers don't help. You don't get shamed for things anymore, you get an audience. So yeah, I
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm actually way more optimistic about this than I think other people might be. I think there's a lot of factors moving in a more positive direction. The economy is picking up in key parts of the country. Yes, I think that a lot of the coastal areas will suffer, but if you look at like the murder rate is down, there's a lot of things to be optimistic about. And my read, more or less, is that a lot of people took the occasion of the pandemic and the Trump presidency to kind of misbehave, but increasingly they are getting on the straight and narrow, cleaning themselves up, all of that kind of thing. That's kind of my read of what's going on. So,
One metaphor that kind of relates to what Polly was saying is, it's kind of like a family blow up, right? And the country needs family therapy, and they're basically like the future is not indeterminate. Like there's one path we could go in which we come together after this and are better for it, even though it was traumatic and all that. There's another path in which this is like the worst thing that happens to the country, and really divides us even further. Like that is something we can choose collectively. And now is the time when that kind of like, sorry to be woo woo or cheesy about it, but like when that family therapy like process is happening. And I'm more optimistic. I was not optimistic about this a year ago, but some things I'm seeing kind of behind the scenes and the way things are playing out, I acknowledge the risks that Richard mentioned. I certainly think that exists. I'm not naive about that, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm relatively optimistic.
What do we make of that other guy who got indicted? The Guamanian guy who was the chef under Obama, then went to go work for Trump after he left the White House. What do we make of him? I mean, there are reports that he's a LDS guy from Guam. Obviously, LDS abut the Chinese in different ways in the South Pacific. What should we make of that? Is there more here than meets the eye with the charging documents? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Just curious. And if not, we'll go to Pablo, and then Mango. I don't know. And then we'll go to Adam. Go ahead, Pablo. Going once, going twice. Okay.
Going 3 times, I'm in. Thank you very much.
No sweat,
Interesting to listen to you all. Thank you for having me up on the space. I'm not American, but
nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Come on, man. Come on. That's a good one. But I class myself as a friend of America.
We could
America
use
general.
as many as we can get.
Yeah, so, definitely. We all do.
Where are you from, Pablo?
What I want to say is this. I'm not a fan of Trump. Trump came in on some noble ideas that I never believed he was going to ever go through with anyway. And I never fell for it. But, the Trump mania, for me, as here in England, we had the media just absolutely every minute of the day, and the TV programs. There's the 4 or 5 channels we have here. Every single program was dedicated to, in some way, undermining anything Trump was linked with or supposed to have said. We've never seen anything like that here in this country. Never. And it really just came into social engineering, which, although I'm not a fan of Trump, I'm not a fan of social engineering either. I believe that people should be free to make up their own minds, free to express themselves, and free to move around, and free to choose what goes in and out of their bodies. But now, and I'll come from the English perspective, because they're very much involved with this. They're on. We've had the lockdown in 2020 that Trump was very proud of. We had the big vaccination campaign, experimental vaccination campaign that Trump is still boasting about. And the whole thing was, as far as I can see, was a complete racket and a big theft on civil liberties. We have the proposed amendments to the international health regulations about to be agreed upon. And I would, whatever side of the political divide you're on in America, and I know it's a big, deep divide and a very hostile one, I urge you all, whatever side of the divide you're on, to go and look into the amendments to the international health regulations that will effectively take away your freedoms, your sovereignty, and your bodily autonomy. I mean, these are not things to be sniffed at.
Sure, but we're talking a bit about Trump right now.
Yeah, I know. And Trump, I'm saying Trump is not a solution, as people are making out.
We agree. Let's go to Mango, and then we'll go to Adam.
Just to kind of pick up on, I think Richard kind of touched on this earlier in the space. The idea that Trump himself kind of represents this body of a cult of personality. And it seems like that's a large part of what kind of attracts a lot of Americans towards him. And I was wondering, how the hell, where the hell is the Republican Party going to go from there? Because let's say, we have 2024, but let's say that, Trump dies tomorrow. DeSantis, I guess, technically is the guy, but there's, a whole section of people who just seem to hate, his stance on, or I guess, I don't know. I'm watching, Tim Pool kind of people. I don't know if they're, representative of, the Republican
They're not.
Party.
They're not representative.
Exactly, but like some of his like more libertarian-esque ideas when he talks about like how the deep state is like a thing in America and how like how that kind of like eats up politicians. Like I don't agree with that, but like I'm just wondering like is that like a thing? Is it like a serious thing? And it's like how the fuck is like Americans or how are Republicans kind of going to go forward post Trump? If it seems like there's a general.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to be Chris Christie, who's a prosecutor, and
I
I
think Chris
think
Christie's going to be like the leader of the Republican Party.
yeah,
like,
I think Chris Christie is going to win the nomination.
Wait,
Yeah.
what do you think? Like I'm talking about like. Really? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Ron DeSantis can survive an inquiry into his time stealing the money from the pensions, and I think that his kind of style of politics is too divisive and won't really work. And I've known Ron DeSantis since 2012, I want to say, and I think when people really start vetting Ron DeSantis, they will see that there's a lot of problems with Ron, and that'll be very hard for them to kind of come back from. I also think just politically, the country doesn't want to be Florida. You know,
I agree with that.
Just doesn't want to go there. You know, it's a nice place to visit, and some of us have friends who live there, and it's nice to visit family and vacation there and everything. But I don't think see it as a model for the future of the country.
Would you say that mainly comes through social policies, or like how would you mean?
The social policies, the kind of like the fact that there's all this illegal alien labor there. It's just not a very representative sample of the country, right? So the Republican Party has a lot of problems, and I think that they're going to have a hard time figuring out how to create a leader. So what they're going to want to do after Trump is they're going to want to go more centrist, more mainstream appeal. And so I think they're more likely to pick somebody from a state where they have to do compromises, like a Republican in a blue state. So that would be kind of my frame on it. And I also think culturally, they're going to want to pick somebody that's a lot like Joe Biden, who's actually much more towards the center. And this will be sort of decided by the party bosses, by the money. This will sort of play out over the next few months. You'll see Fox is less likely to have Trump on after he's indicted. You'll see Ron DeSantis start to struggle because he threw in with the kind of mob side of the PayPal mafia, which is David Sachs and Elon Musk. And, you're going to start to see a lot of pressure brought to bear on Musk's empire by our deep state. And you're going to see some of the smarter PayPal people have already made the turn, and that'll play out over the next few years. But basically, my read is that, I know Ron DeSantis. Okay, Ron DeSantis had a roommate slash, best friends slash, what would we say? What can we say about that? His bestie, right? Ken Sturman was his roommate and his landlord, and he was sleeping with an underage girl, got caught doing that. By the way, he was a defense contractor running a kind of shady defense contracting operation during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And he went and shot himself in the head, allegedly. Whether there was foul play or not, who knows? But that's the guy's best friend. And I don't know about you, but I've never heard of anyone talk about their best friend being their landlord. Like, that's kind of a weird thing. You don't usually hear about that, So I think Ron DeSantis is going to have a lot of trouble getting through a vetting process. And Chris Christie will have essentially infinite money because he will be a candidate that compromised billionaire oligarch class will want to pay tribute to as a way of still being Republican. That's kind of my sense of it.
And you're saying this if Donald Trump wouldn't be in the primary?
So both sides. So the U.S. deep state is going to want to control both sides of the trade. They're going to want to kind of control who the Republican nominee is and who the Democrat nominee is, and they're going to want to do that, especially given the age of the president.
Yeah, I think a different way of stating that is that with Trump out of the picture, Christie is being set up to be the catalyst to help repair the GOP for the future. With Trump in the picture in 2024, I don't think the Republican Party is going to stand a chance of any motion or reform until 2028. But Christie, I think things are happening faster and positively. I don't think Christie is going to be leader of the Republican Party going forward or anything like that, but I do think he's going to play a critical role as a catalyst for healing it. And the dividing line we're going to see is Christie versus DeSantis. And just to add to your comments about DeSantis really quickly, I mean, number one, he's way overrated. He's really smart. He's good on policy. He's been actually a good governor, but he's way overrated as a presidential candidate. I'm more charismatic than he is. Like, let's put it that way. He's not charismatic. He also, like, bottom line, like, he didn't call out Trump on his unconstitutionalism. Like, that's beta as hell in my eyes. Like, to Polly's point, like, that's pretty black and white. Whereas I think Christie now is calling out Trump and recognizes his failings, and so there's a dividing line there around actually, do you support the Constitution or not? I mean, as cheesy as that sounds, that's kind of what's happening in the GOP.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at the money too, right? So money is a big part of this as well. And you'll notice that there's lots of people that Chris Christie could have prosecuted and didn't prosecute when he was a U.S. attorney. And many of those people are now donating to his campaign. There are a few that he did prosecute who ultimately ended up being favorable towards him and helped them get cleaned up in different ways. Because there's lots of ways in which various billionaires get in trouble. And so I think the Chris Christie is probably the most underrated of the bunch, and DeSantis is probably the most overrated. And I think the rest of them, I don't think really have a chance of winning the nomination. So that's just kind of where I see it. Trump is basically very beloved by the Scotch-Irish base, or the redneck base of the party. But the question then becomes, will they ultimately pick the candidate? And it's hard to see that. My sense is that Christie's style of going to all of the town halls and kind of having conversations with voters like he did when he was governor of New Jersey, that's going to play very well in New Hampshire. And so there's going to be efforts kind of there to push Christie forward. And that'll be kind of interesting to watch. And you got a sense of this too with Mick Mulvaney, who's actually backing Tim Scott. And he was very favorable to Chris Christie entering the race. So that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, anyway, my sense, just very bluntly, is that I think the Republican Party is going to go through some things, and that as a party, it has a lot of problems just structurally. The types of people who donate to it, the vision it has for the future of the country, certainly a real problem.
Well, so do you think the coalition that Trump has kind of built within like the rural base, do you think that just kind of like implodes or like collapses after Trump?
Yeah.
Or does it go somewhere else?
Yeah, I think Trump's coalition is a lot weaker than people think.
Yeah,
and I also think people get tired of you over time. This is why a lot of boomers should like figure out strategies for retiring, right? Because like if you're there too long, you become kind of a drag. Like Trump is just playing the favorites now, and we kind of know that like none of that stuff really worked. He's just kind of pathetic in a certain sense.
And also, I mean, I think Pat Robertson's death is an exclamation mark on how the religious right is no longer the main coalitional force in the GOP. I mean, it's changing, and it can't just be a negative party, an oppositional party to everything. It needs a positive vision, and it also needs a coalition or fusion of different coalitions that come together. And that playing field, as I see it, is wide open, and that's going to take real, like, that's if I were a politician, I would say, wow, that's a generational opportunity to help define the Republican Party of the future. And in many ways, this is happening faster than it is for the left, because Democrats have issues too. They're having an identity crisis, but my guess is this is coming to a head a lot sooner and faster, and is more toxic and so forth now. But yeah, I think I think you have to look at we're gonna have a couple wilderness years where it's like, what do we stand for? Who are we? What is that positive vision of the future that actually makes sense and has a coalition behind it? And you can see people starting to compete for this. You have a NatCon type crowd, which I think has some substance there, and some also like fuckery, if I do say so. and then there's like the Catholics, you know, the compact mag people, not like the working class, multiracial kind of Catholicism vision. There are all these different kinds of competing visions emerging, but I don't really see any of them gaining a huge amount of steam right now. But I do think there is an opportunity there for the future. We'll see.
It'll be the fat man. People like him. People trust him.
The big boy is the catalyst.
Yeah, it'll be.
And then the playing field will be open for the future.
And then of course, they know each other. Biden and Christie know each other, so there are ways in which that kind of coalition they can exist.
It's the blue hen game.
Yeah.
Gang. I mean, you can't even write the script, right? Better. Like the Delaware guys end up fighting it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's basically correct. So my sense, basically, just to be honest about it, is, my sense more or less is that the Republican Party is going to have to figure out what it wants to be to the rest of the country going forward. And I think that, we'll learn more about what happened with Trump as the case kind of goes through. We've also seen in the past there have been cases that the kind of deep state prosecutions bring where they send messages to other countries. So in this particular case, the message is to the Bibi Israelis as well as to MBS about not buying off our presidents, not trying to mess with our presidents. And of course, there's a message here. We saw with Sarkozy got prosecuted, and he was ultimately given house arrest for a kind of similar offense, given his ties with the Libyans and all the bribery going on there.
Yeah, and there's almost like a red pill on the red pill, which, pardon my cringe language, was America first even American owned? And once you realize that and let that sink in, I think perspectives start to shift a little bit.
Yeah, as Joe Biden said in the last State of the Union, Americans are tired of being played for suckers. Let's go to Adam real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as like the question of who comes after Trump with the Republicans, and I think it's kind of a moot point because I think, you guys were talking about, what's a positive vision for the future that the Republicans have and all of that. And there is none. And I think the only thing that unites them really is a hatred or fear for the left. So I think that whoever the nominee is, same thing in 2016 when everybody expected Trump to lose. Like, what's going to happen to the soul of the Republican Party? Like, I think it's just going to, like, in no particular direction, basically. And I was just going to say, like, I live in Fort Lauderdale, so, like, kind of in the belly of the beast. Like, there's a bunch of boats outside my, parked outside my building that, like, still. And we talked about this a little bit last night, Chuck, but and I talked about it with a couple of people today that I think with just this pile of charges that just keep getting stacked on, that people are just going to start looking at it like the way when somebody gets accused of like sexual assault and it's like one woman and then another woman and then another woman, and people just start to assume that they're guilty. I think the same thing is happening with Trump, where it's like the specifics aren't going to matter that much to most people, but he's just going to look so guilty that I think a lot of people are going to lose faith in him. And just anecdotally, like from a few different people that I talked to today, that was kind of their feeling, like enough is enough. And I also think that Republicans don't want to admit it, but they like the piece they want to admit, like, you know what I mean? They're enjoying it more than they are letting on. I'm not seeing that many posts lately that are saying like, don't you miss when gas was this price and we were, like basically posts about don't you miss the Trump years? Like I don't really see that much now. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, it's sort of like it just gets exhausting to defend somebody like Trump.
Yeah, and I think people are happy not having to do it every day, and they're happy to not argue with their family about it. And um, yeah, like Tim Dillon made this point a long time ago, but he was talking about like if Trump was the CEO of a company and he was making half the employees crazy, like it kind of wouldn't matter how good the company was doing or how much money they were making. It's like if you're making half of the people, not doable anymore.
I also just don't understand what the proposition is for voters now, right? With a Trump presidency, it's like he says, "Oh, I am your vengeance," and it's like, well, a lot of us don't really want to do the vengeance thing, you know. We want to just like come together and do other things.
Yeah.
Their entire value proposition is the middle finger, number one. It's anti-woke, quote unquote, and anti like, oh my gosh, my kids are trans. It's all oppositional and fake. It's all negative. It's not for anything. It's only against things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are just kind of sick of having these cultural fights. Like we're now in a world in which like I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime, where Roe v. Wade is a state's issue, or abortion's a state's issue, and I think that takes away a lot of the energy of the Republican Party, which was a kind of alliance between the corporatists and the social cons.
Dobbs was the worst thing that happened to the Republican Party in the short term, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's just a very difficult position for so the party has to find new social issues that animate people. And honestly, like I think a lot of us feel that like we're not necessarily pro-trans or whatever, but we feel kind of sad for trans people because of what they're going through on all sides of it. It's kind of a downer of an issue.
Well, and it's such a marginal issue too. I mean, I think we all I think it's like I wrote in my thing, like Joe Biden is not politically correct, but he is inclusive, and I think there's a balance to strike there where most people want to be kind and they want to follow a path of common sense. And right now, there's just these extreme polarities, and there are legitimate cultural grievances. I feel them, obviously. It's so easy to get lost in them. And the incentives are there for clout and fundraising to just max out on those issues and not actually solve anything or get anything done. So I'm like personally just leapfrogging those issues into like let's like actually solve real problems and let's come together. And if Biden is better at solving problems as he appears to be, then like let's support him. And there's also a sense in which the Democrat Party is a better vector for advancing MAGA, like the smarter MAGA themed policies. I mean, think about that.
Yeah, I've got to say, from a bearded man perspective, I'm very happy to see Jack Smith out there. Like, I think it's good to see people with the full beard changing things, and just felt very matter of fact the whole situation. I think that there's going to be a lot of efforts, though, to redirect former Republicans or like former MAGA people, and that many of those efforts are going to be foreign intelligence operations or adjacent to them. They'll be sort of connected with the Russians or the Israelis or what have you. So just be kind of mindful of that. Richard, are you there or are you still running?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm in an indoor playground at the moment. So this is what my life is like.
As one does.
But yeah, I kind of wanted to address a few of these things. I mean, because I kind of heard both perspectives from Jeff of the sense of like, look, Biden's actually pretty good. So isn't this just a better vector to go on? And then I also seem to hear from him kind of like, well, the GOP, Trump is now over and it's kind of open and can it change? And the religious right is dying and so on. So I think he's maybe of two minds. I guess I understand that. I'm kind of of two minds.
I don't
Well, I
think
think,
the GOP
yeah.
is going to change anytime soon. And I think Pauly said this while I was driving of, like they don't, Trump was the catalyst and Trump changed their minds. He blew their minds and red pilled them and all that kind of stuff, but they don't need him on some level. And they've gone past him. I mean, you see these moments where they'll criticize him about the vaccines and stuff like that. And so I kind of agree. I don't think the GOP is going to really fundamentally change. And there are some major, like, really long-term trajectories. I mean, the religious right, yeah, it's changing and it's certainly shrinking. I mean, the Southern Baptist Convention like shrinks by 3 to 5% every year, and that's bad. Atheism increases maybe at the same rate, maybe not that high, but it increases. So, yeah, but it's not going anywhere. And the abortion fight, I think, is going to be with us for like the next 2 decades because they don't want to just have a 6-week ban in Florida and Montana or something. As difficult as that is, it's actually, for what it's worth, it's actually very difficult in Montana because we have a state constitution on the matter. But anyway, I think they want to go for the whole thing. I mean, you're not just pro-life as an individual choice. I mean, you want to rescue these babies. I mean, they are motivated by that. Is that the majority of the country? Obviously not. Is it a majority of the Republican Party? Maybe. And in terms of just all this stuff, like, the long-term trajectory towards being a multiracial working class party, that's been going on since the 90s, if not before. It's kind of like the ultimate consequence of realignment after the FDR coalition. And, as I've said this many times, Bill Clinton, when he ran in 1992, he got 75% of the non-college educated white vote. Donald Trump got 70% of that vote in 2016. And we have a whole new group of people who actually resonate with them who are non-white. So like a lot of these ideas that I remember hearing over and over again about how, the immigrants, they vote Democratic, and, the GOP is the white man's party, blah, blah, blah. Okay, kernels of truth there, but I don't think it's actually like the fundamental truth. I think there are genuine, like, non-white Trump fans who resonate with all of this stuff, the anti-woke stuff, the deep state conspiracy, even the pro-life stuff. I mean, it resonates with them. They are genuine. And so, I mean, I think that Christie, I agree with you. I see a path for Christie in this kind of weird way. And it's a long shot, but it's possible. But I think that would be a kind of retarding effort by making the GOP once again the party of, Brooks Brothers suit wearing middle class, stick up their butt type people, all good people, my people, the GOP of my youth. I think there might be a kind of retarding function going on there to make it the Episcopalian party or something. But I think it's done. I mean, I think these long-term trends are underway. And some of those groups that Jeff mentioned, which, I think are ops to some degree, particularly the NatCon, might very well be a Likud op led by Herzoni. You have the Compact NAG is kind of the Russian op version of that. They can kind of like rationalize and justify these things, and they'll write all these think pieces about how like the American working class coalition is like secretly Catholic or something. I mean, I'm preparing myself to read articles like that, but all of that is post hoc rationalization. And they're going to rationalize this whole thing. They're going to keep rationalizing in 2032 and 2042, et cetera. But in terms of like the identity of the Republican Party, I mean, I don't think this is going to change in the next 20 years. I mean, I think it's set in stone because I believe that Donald Trump was, despite his like monumental importance, which I don't want to underestimate, I do think he was more of a symptom than a cause. He's kind of like a symptom and a catalyst. It's a mix, but I think he's symptomatic of a big turn. And the GOP, its brand going forward is going to be, multiracial, working class, nuts, conspiracy theories, religious right stuff, backlash against teachers. I mean, that I don't know how you can't just like turn the car around, at this point. And so I think we're in this for a long term. Like, this is going to be the GOP. And for someone like me, it's just like, I don't want to be a part of that. I mean, I see it. Maybe I have some sympathy towards it, but I have a lot of contempt, to be frank. And I can't see myself going along with this at all for the next 2 decades. That's my view.
Yeah, Richard, if I could just add / respond. Yeah, I mean, I think you were accurate in describing my view. I mean, I think there are basically two responsible paths forward, right? One is to, leave the Republican Party, since it's so messed up, and just focus on solving problems, either as an independent or as a Democrat, or just kind of rise above partisan politics. And the second path is staying within the Republican Party and helping it build a future and like heal or whatever, and like define the vision going forward. And maybe you and I disagree about how long that will take or how possible that is, but I do think those are two different paths that are out there. And my path is more of the former, which is, I think in the last few years, I started every week having a conversation with somebody with different political point of view than I did, including many on the center left and many on the far left. And I realized, wow, we're actually not that different. Like, there's actually more common ground than I thought. And maybe that's because I'm actually more moderate and even center left than I realized, or whatever. But I found that there was a lot more common ground there than I expected. And I do see a possibility with working with them, especially the centrist Democrats, to actually just get stuff done and solve problems. So my personal point of view is just to like tune out all of the partisan stuff and all of like the tribal bullshit and just focus on solving problems. And I remember deliberately thinking, and I thought this in my kind of like snarky, like maybe conceited mind at the time. I thought, and I think there's some truth to it. I thought, everybody right now is so polarized. The contrarian thing to do is to consensus build. So while everybody else is going super polarized and fighting, like, I'm going to actually build consensus and like focus on building bridges with other people and solving problems. And while the Republican Party is like arguing over dumb shit like drag queen story hour, which, let's be honest, it doesn't really affect anybody. If you don't like it, like, don't bring your kid. Like, I'm going to like focus on actual real problems to solve and help solve them. So that's where I'm at. That's how I'd respond to what you said.
For being such a free country, we're awfully enslaved by our partisan politics these days, which I think is annoying.
Yeah, I think well said. Let's bring up Just Ice. I don't know. Go ahead, Just Ice. Justice? I don't know.
Hi. So I was a lifetime Republican. I served under Ronald Reagan and lived in and served in Washington during a magical time when people believed in the country. And I'm a lifelong attorney, and I love being an attorney. And in 1979, I started working on a problem that had not been languaged at all, called human trafficking. And the bringing of people to this country to serve for no remuneration or to be a mail order bride. And eventually that was named as human trafficking. And I cannot agree with Rick more than say, as Republicans, we must identify a problem that can be solved through cooperation. And as I have written law throughout the entire United States and helped form the Uniform Code Against Human Trafficking. Those are laws that we can all agree upon and move forward and help people never live that life or that tragedy. And if they have, to help them move on. And when we focus on the other, that is simply division, propaganda, and profiteering. It's the same as in a war where somebody goes and carpetbags and makes money on division. And the only way out of that, as I have discovered in my 6 decades of life, is to really stand for solving something that matters. And that's the deficit in the party now, is that there's nothing being solved that matters. It's, there's water problems, there's pollution problems, there's all kinds of things that are happening. But to you young leaders who are smarter than me and more energetic than I am, Rick is absolutely correct. Choose something to solve and find a way to reach out to everyone and find a way to message that it's in everyone's best interest. And that is the only way to advance who we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Justice.
Extremely well said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop you down to from speakers because I think there should be kind of more content than just that. But yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead, Vic, and then I'm gonna head out in a second, Richard. I think it's fine to close down the space, but go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, so I'm actually someone from the left, and I was curious. I'm open to hearing ideas on solving any number of problems we have, so I just wanted to throw one out there. One of the big problems like the world is facing right now is climate change. I would love to hear a conservative ideology or method of approaching how to solve that problem. So I don't mean to get
Can
too
anyone
into the
hear
weeds of
anything? I can't
policy,
hear
but
shit.
yeah.
I can give you that, Vic. Do you want the 2-minute version?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I consider myself center right, and I'm also, I think for a while I was skeptical of climate change, and it felt like a Trojan horse for socialism. But over time, I realized, no, this is really about. It's really about clean air, clean water, and food, as with a growing planet that's going to exceed 10 billion by the end of the century. And that I do support. I mean, we all have children, or I have a child. I want him to have clean air, clean water, and other people all around the planet to have the same thing. So, and the path to get there, I think that the center right path to get there, I think whether we like it or not, the sustainability conversation is the fulcrum of the conversation about defining the future. We have to participate and solve problems if we want to be part of the solution of defining the future. Example of that is, if we want decentralization, then we need decentralized energy. I think a lot of the climate change community has been a turnoff to people on the right because it's perceived as diplomats and activists yelling at each other. But now we can get data. Like, we have satellites. Like, we can get all these data and make practical decisions. Now, I think there's a possibility of breakthrough technologies. Like, we need 0 to 1 technologies on energy in order to meet, these different goals that we have out there. There are plastics in the ocean that are a problem, undeniably. So I do definitely think there is a center right take on sustainability that's just like, hey, we want to use capitalism to solve these problems, and we want to solve them. Maybe we have a different emphasis on how we do so, and we can debate solutions rather than debate whether this is an issue in the first place, which is dumb.
Yeah, I think the big problem is the Republican Party is just the oil party too. Like, I think that's something we need to just kind of contend with, is sort of thinking about how do these parties finance themselves. And I think something like 40 to 50% of the money that the Republican Party raises comes from the oil lobbies. It's not a small number.
Like, I think we should ban plastic that's not biodegradable or compostable. Like, I think there are some
Yeah, I
common,
agree.
like,
I mean,
I don't know
there's a
if that's
lot of
common sense, but
solutions.
like, I think I do think there's an environmental agenda where you're going to find a lot more consensus or possibility for consensus than people might think. And we're right at that turning point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one last question: do you think Biden should contest Florida?
I'm sorry, did you say he should contest Florida?
I was asking, do you think Biden should contest Florida, or is Florida too red and Biden should just ignore it?
Well, I mean, Charles has emphasized the redneck vote or the Scotch-Irish ethnicity. And, you guys remember that picture. And I know I think I was the first to highlight it, by the way, but of, Biden backslapping and having a conversation with a guy wearing a cracker t-shirt while DeSantis skulked away. If Trump is in the picture, I don't think Biden would stand a chance in Florida. With Trump out of the picture, I do think he stands a chance in Florida. So if he's against DeSantis, I think Biden would be more likely to get the rednecks over DeSantis. But then again, DeSantis is pretty popular down here. So I don't know. I don't have a smart
My
answer
view is
on
it
this.
doesn't really matter. I mean, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, the GOP needs to sweep all three with Florida in order to have a fighting chance, and they won't. Like, I think people don't really understand how bad the map is for the Republican Party going into 2024. It's pretty rough.
And Biden is really, people don't realize, like, he appeals to the swing vote of Trump. Like, he is, almost perfectly designed. He's, a straight white male who wears aviator glasses and like rides a Corvette. He's not that politically correct, but he is inclusive. He's got that Scotch-Irish appeal. He's a backslapper kind of guy. He's pretty moderate. I think he would outcompete DeSantis certainly for swing voters. Against Trump, it might be more difficult, but even there, I think he would win just by virtue of being more sane.
Incumbents tend to be reelected too, just in general, unless there's some kind of crazy thing. So I think it's going to be very hard to beat Biden just generally, and I think that's all to the good.
Yeah, I mean, the health issue and age is the real factor there. I mean, I just came out and endorsed Biden, but in the back of my head, I'm like, well, gee, what if something happens to him health-wise? Then, then we're in uncharted waters. But to date, it almost feels, and this is a little bit pat, but it almost feels like the more doddering he gets, the more powerful he becomes. And there's something like, just putting a positive spin on it, there's something almost Reagan-esque about Biden and his ability to delegate to really competent people and, get a lot of things done despite his frailty.
Well, yeah, it's like Charles always says, the Republicans are always talking about how old and, out of it Biden is, and yet he keeps kicking their ass. So how out of it is he really?
Yeah, or out of it are the Republicans, right? there's several ways of taking it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my read basically is I suspect Biden will be reelected. I do think the reason the deep state had to act to try to take over the Republican Party was so it had a hedge going into 2024, right? The U.S. deep state obviously wants to control both parties, or to basically limit the risk around the election. And so I think if it's an election that's fought between these two University of Delaware alumni, one of whom is a federal prosecutor, the other whom has been in government, for 50 years, that's just a very different world that's possible, I guess.
I mean, I would say to anyone doubting the Christie thing, which, to me sounded pretty outlandish at first too, but could anybody imagine like a better first move, like on the chessboard, than what he just did? Like how he came out swinging? Like, to me, it was perfect. And so if he's continuing along that trajectory,
almost stagecrafted, which makes it interesting, right?
The timing is the tell.
Yeah.
the timing is really the tell.
Yeah, and then of course he had the clip of him saying the grift about the Kushners, and I
Right.
can imagine I could see a President Christie pardoning Donald Trump, but not Christie or not Kushner, because obviously this is a fight over Kushner too.
Well, and it was so smart because, as much as everyone says the Republicans all love Trump, they do not love Ivanka and Jared. And they did not from day one. I think everybody right away was like, wait, what? You're giving them jobs where? So I think it was a really smart move to emphasize going after them as a way to kind of split Trump's support.
Yeah, I think in a certain sense, it seems like Biden and Christie are working together to clean things up. That would be the frame I would have on it.
Yeah, and he's also guaranteed himself endless TV time because every TV producer or person who runs a podcast or whatever, anybody with a big platform who knows that if they put Christie on, he's going to say juicy stuff like that. He's going to be able to get himself endless free media.
Yeah, and it'll also be useful for those media properties who want to defend themselves from being too pro-Trump from 2016 or 2020, right? So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I have to go. Somebody's at my door. So, Richard, you have it. I'll catch up a little later with everybody, and maybe in the coming few days I'll come back. But I'm spending a long overdue weekend with some loved ones, so gotta go. Catch up later.
Well, don't everybody go at once.
All right, now that
I can jump back in just 1 second.
Now that the fun police is left, maybe you could deputize someone who's going to prioritize having a good time. Yeah? Hi. Hello. Slap a gold star on me, Big Spence. Let's go.
I don't know. Should we just put the old bookmark in this conversation?
All right, man.
All right.
Yeah, there's probably not much left to cover.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
Did
It was a
anyone
blast.
record this, by the way? I think I forgot to click the record. I don't know if someone is recording this on their own.
I think that you did because when I logged back in, I think it said I was being recorded. I'm not sure.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe it is. Okay.
Or maybe it said I might be being recorded. I'm not 100% on that.
It is because you would see the recording button in the top of the space, so it's not being recorded.
Okay, if anyone recorded it on their own, feel free to post it on YouTube or something. Anyway, guys, so I think we might have reached the end of something, or maybe the beginning of something truly horrible. That's my impression. Thanks for everyone for contributing.
Yeah, real quick, I was gonna say, Richard, maybe this does fall to either you or Chuck, but I do think there's room for someone to write a great essay about the conservative case for Biden 24 and why he is the mega.
Well, I mean, look at the pin. Yeah, I've actually done it. Look at the pin profile. Look at my pin tweet and check that out and see if it does it justice.
We'll do for sure.
But I mean, there are other chances for it. But
I'm going to gear up to endorse Old Joe, so I'll certainly do something before as the election heats up.
Biden needs to put some MAGA for Biden merch outside though.
He's got the Dark Brandon T-shirt. It's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, I think there's an aesthetic opportunity to wear your aviators and eat ice cream this summer. So,
Yes. All right, guys. Thanks for contributing and thanks for listening. And I will talk to all you guys soon. All right. Cheers. Ciao.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend, boys.